Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have very big news that we're witnessing the second day of an invasion of the Kursk region in mainland Russia. As Ukrainian forces plow their way through the territory, we're seeing Russian soldiers surrender en masse to the Ukrainians, and also we're seeing soldiers even desert and run off as a result of the Ukrainian attacks. We're also seeing that Putin just called an emergency security council meeting with his ministers to discuss the response to this new crisis developing in mainland Russia, and also Putin is asking for condemnation from several countries around the world to condemn this attack and to repel the Ukrainians out of Russian territory. So right now it's a very big crisis and this is unfolding as we speak. But right now let's go ahead and jump right into our first article of the day, which goes to us on Twitter at It's the Enforcer. So just a quick recap here, we can see that the Russian government has held a Security Council meeting to discuss the invasion of the Kursk region of Russia by Ukrainian forces, and also it says that Ukrainian forces have allegedly seized control of the border village of Sudza and are moving rapidly into mainland Russia, and this is causing Putin to go into a total panic. And this is indeed the case, and yesterday we actually covered the story in somewhat of some depth, and we had actually thought that maybe this was just an incursion, but now this is starting to look like a new front being opened inside of Russia by the Ukrainian forces with the hopes of redirecting other forces from other areas of the front line to have to come and respond to this attack inside of Russian territory. So right now this is looking to be much larger than previously expected, and the Ukrainians are moving through, like I said, at a rapid pace, and right now the Russians are surrendering en masse and they're unable to stop the advance. But jumping into our next article here, this one goes to War Translated, and we're also seeing that Putin made a brief statement about the events in the Kursk region, and he didn't have any special statements, and Putin simply mumbled something about indiscriminate shelling and instructed everyone in the Kursk region to resolve all the issues. So we're actually not going to watch the video of Putin making the statement. Of course, Putin went through and decided to start claiming that the Ukrainians were committing war crimes, which is very hypocritical, but simply what's happening here is Putin is in a complete panic as to how to deal with this, and he's currently out here mumbling, which is not very much like Putin's usual style. He appears to be out of sorts because he's not sure how to deal with the situation either. So right now he's simply telling everybody, you go figure it out, I'm not fooling with it, because I don't know what I'm doing either. So right now it's total chaos from the very top in Russia. But then shortly after Putin made this very brief statement to the press, he then went into that Security Council meeting and met with the Defense Minister Belousov, as well as the Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov, as well as FSB Director Bortnikov, and the Secretary of the Security Council Shoigu is also there in this meeting, and according to Gerasimov, the advance of the AFU deep into Russian territory has been stopped. But that is a complete fallacy. Gerasimov just blatantly lied to Putin in this meeting. The AFU is still making their way through Russian territory, and not only are they doing that, but they're also making the Russians surrender and taking them prisoner at the same time. So this is only the beginning of a very big crisis for the Russians that could rival the severity of the Wagner coup that we saw last year, and right now I think the reality is just starting to set in with the Russians just how serious this actually is. But with that, moving into our next article here, this one goes to Inside Geopolitics. And in a very hypocritical move here, President Putin has just urged countries to condemn Ukraine's invasion into Russia, and currently over 1,000 Ukrainian troops and hardware have crossed the border near the town of Sudza, and also reports suggest that Ukraine are in control of a number of Russian villages. And we have indeed gotten confirmation of that as well. The Ukrainians have taken control of a large amount of Russian villages, and actually a lot more than expected, and also the troop number inside of Russia is growing very rapidly as well. So this is very hypocritical for Putin to be talking about condemning an invasion when Putin literally started this entire conflict by invading Ukraine wrongfully without any proper basis. But with that, jumping into our next article, this one goes to Jason J. Smart. And in this post right here, we get a better idea of just how far the Ukrainians have actually gotten. And the post says that the Ukrainian military is already present in 11 Russian settlements to a depth of 15 kilometers, and the width of the front is 10 to 11 kilometers. And also interesting, Sudza, the town where it all began in Russia, is already completely deserted. There's also a gas metering station there, which provides gas to Europe, which is very important in just a moment. And right here, you see on the map that here is the area which the Ukrainians are taking, and they're currently expanding outward, as you can see right here, into the Kursk region. And also, just in case anyone's confused, the town of Sudza is right on the Ukraine-Russian border, and that is a border checkpoint, which is basically ground zero of the Ukraine invasion into Russia right now. So if you hear me mentioning that town, that is what we're talking about, because in the next post, we're about to see just how bad the town actually got attacked. And moving on to that next post here, we actually have a post from Nexa which shows us a photo of the Sudza checkpoint in the Kursk region, and the post says the situation in the city is very tense, and the city's mayor, Vladimir Slashev, told propagandists that, quote unquote, we have a very tense situation, there's no time to talk, and a lot of people call about evacuation, which they're currently doing in the city. So take taking a look at the photo right here of the city of Sudza, this place has been absolutely wrecked by the Ukrainian forces. We can see here the border checkpoint buildings have been destroyed. It looks like they've been shelled from above, and also they're smoking, and the entire area looks like it's been absolutely ravaged by the Ukrainian forces. So this is a massive development right here, and currently we're seeing the beginnings of a major invasion, and this right here is ground zero of that invasion. So very wild to see this in photo evidence coming out as it happens in real time. But not only is the mayor of Sudza very concerned about these developments, we can see in our next post here, which goes to War Translated, that Russian news reports a difficult situation in the town of Sudza and the Kursk Special Operations Zone, and that there is no light in the city, and an urgent evacuation is taking place, and that the city will soon be closed to entry. And like I said, there's currently an evacuation of the town of Sudza as the Russian forces try to get the civilians out of there as Ukrainian forces take the town over completely. So it's absolute chaos in Sudza, and it's just getting worse. But moving into our next post here, which also goes to War Translated, we see a video here of a resident of the town of Sudza in the Kursk region speaking of the beginning of a quote-unquote invasion, and Russian troops abandoned their positions and left the town unguarded, and there was no aviation, although the helicopters were flying over Kursk. So this guy in the video right here, which we're about to take a quick look at, is actually trying to warn the Russian civilians in the area that the Russian government is actually lying and there is an ongoing invasion, and right now Putin and also Shoigu are trying to cover this up by saying that they have it under control. But let's take a look at the video here and see what the guy has to say. So the man says that Ukraine invaded Russia throughout our city. He said at 3:11 shelling started, and he goes on to add that we jumped into the car and had to move away, and then we returned after shelling ended, and then he said we returned for documents under the shelling, and then our house was also shelled as well, and it's very dangerous to return, and also tanks are there, and he says the government says everything is all right and nothing's happened, and he says it's a total effery. He says going back is scary and it's utter bollocks. Where's our glorious army, he says. He said no air defense, and in Kursk, at least there are helicopters, and he's going off right now. He's losing it. He says here that the Chechnya forces must have left first. And he says people wait on the highway from Soldatsky to the Kursk Ring Road, and those without vehicles cannot return yet. And he says parents were left to die back in the city, and they could not go. So this testimony from the resident of Sudza is very clear evidence that the situation is indeed not under control, and currently there is a lot of death happening in the area as well as people try to evacuate, so it's not going good. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to Status 6, Military and Conflict News, and not only are we seeing that the Russian soldiers are running off, but also a huge number of Russian POWs have been taken by Ukrainian forces during the operation in the Kursk Oblast. And in this photo right here, you can see the large amount of troops which are currently laying on the road right here, being taken prisoner by the Ukrainian forces in an unprecedented photo. You can see more of them being taken prisoner right here. They're being processed and vetted. And right here, you can see here's a photo from the actual border checkpoint itself of the Russian POWs being marched back to be processed. So this is a big event right here. We're seeing so many Russian prisoners being taken that it's almost hard to believe that they're surrendering like this. It looks like the Russian conscripts are not willing to fight for their territory, and they're easily being taken prisoners. So very interesting to see. But with that, we're jumping into our next article here, and this one goes to Chris O. Wiki. And we're also hearing about the reaction from Russian military bloggers about this incursion, and right now the mill bloggers are furious at the failure of Russia's Ministry of Defense to protect the Kursk region border from the current large-scale invasion from Ukraine, and the mill bloggers are calling the situation there hell on earth. And real quick, I'm going to show you this video that we actually saw yesterday of Ukrainian fighter jets flying right over the area, and take a look at this. It's almost like a scene from a movie, how this is going down. And take a look at that. There's Ukrainian fighter jets flying over at very high speed, right over the road, bombing targets, including the ground forces, which are shelling the area quite in big numbers. So this is crazy to see this in action. And right now, the civilians are panicking, like I mentioned a moment ago. I can't stress that enough, just how bad the Russian government and the civilians are panicking. So with that, we're going to move on from that video and move into our next post here, which goes to Max24. And just to show you just how fast the Ukrainians are actually moving into Russian territory, we see video evidence right here of Russian vehicles burned about 25 kilometers from the border, and also they mentioned here that sabotage and intelligence groups are working in the Kursk region. So taking a look at the video here, you can see a plethora of burned vehicles on the side of the road 25 kilometers into the Russian mainland, which is very far, much farther than previously reported that the Ukrainians actually were. And right there you can see even more military equipment burned on the side of the road, and in just a moment you'll see even more right here abandoned on the side of the road. So this is proof that either the Ukrainian forces have made it this far, or the sabotage groups are making it even further ahead of the Ukrainian forces to basically pave the way for an invasion even further into that region. So this is very amazing to see. But with that, we're moving into our next article here, and this one goes to Nexa. And this is a very big claim right here, and we currently need more confirmation of this before we report it as a fact. And right here in the post from Nexa, it says that Russian Z channels report that the AFU is taking control of the Sudska gas metering station in the Kursk region. And it's important to note that this station is very important because it transports Russian gas to Europe. So if this facility right here, which we see in the photo, was taken by the AFU, this will currently control whether or not Russia can export gas to Europe, because this is the choke point for that right here that we're seeing in the photo. So if this was indeed taken, this will be one of the largest victories that Ukraine has had throughout this attack into the mainland Russia. And this is not the only major prize that the Ukrainians might take during this invasion into mainland Russia. And in our next post here from Intel Crab, we're learning that the ground zero of Sudska, which is on the Russian border, is less than 55 kilometers away from the Kursk nuclear power plant. So remember, we just saw the video showing the vehicles of Russia being burned on the side of the road at least 25 kilometers into the Russian border, and now we're seeing that the nuclear power plant in Kursk is only 55 kilometers away from the border. So the Ukrainians might be approaching this nuclear power plant very rapidly in the coming days, or maybe even in the next 48 hours. So we'll have to see if they actually get there. And also another very interesting fact about the Kursk nuclear power plant is right now it's currently without the men that were actually operating the plant. And in this post from PSO1, we're seeing that the Kursk nuclear power plant has been left without the men that operate it, and among the Rosguardia employees guarding the Kursk NPP, only the women remain, and apparently all the men were rounded up from the nuclear power plant and sent to the border to try to protect the area, and the employees were not given any instructions in case of an attack on the station. So this also is another testament to how desperate Russia is for manpower to try to defend the region, because they took the nuclear power plant employees away from their post right here at the station and put them on the border to fight, leaving the power plant totally unguarded and only with the women remaining behind to try to fend off any attacks at the facility. And right now, they're not instructed on how to actually respond to an attack on the facility, so they're pretty much untrained and left vulnerable guarding this very important facility that Russia has, which produces power for the entire region. So it's very possible that while the Russians have control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine, the Ukrainians might actually come in and take control of Russia's nuclear power plant in Kursk to level the playing field. So this is certainly a very interesting situation which is unfolding that we'll be watching very closely about the nuclear power plant. But with that, moving into our last article of the day, we have one from Nexa Reports. And something very strange is happening also in the Belgorod region. I'm not really sure what's happening here, so I'm not even going to speculate on it, but currently in the city of Stroitel in the Belgorod region, Russian special forces are on the move, and it's unclear what's happening, but the town's located 20 kilometers north of Belgorod. So let's take a look at the video clip and see the Russian forces moving around very rapidly, which looks like they're responding almost to an attack. So let's take a look. So right here, you can actually see Russian special forces running through the city right here near Belgorod, and it's unclear what they're responding to or what is going on, but clearly there is something causing them to panic here, and I'm not really sure what, but considering there is a border incursion happening and right now a major breach of Russia's sovereignty by Ukraine, this appears to be maybe related to that. So we'll simply be waiting for more confirmation to come out exactly what this was, but it is an indication that things are happening elsewhere in Russia as well, and it could be related to sabotage groups being deployed by Ukraine into these different areas of Russia, including Belgorod as well. But with that, that is actually our last piece of news for the day, but today's been an absolutely crazy news day happening inside of Russia, and we were actually first to the story yesterday when the Enforcer covered it on his short war video, and also we talked about it on our stream last night. I didn't see anybody really putting the proper emphasis behind it as to just how big of an attack this was, but it appears that today people are waking up and seeing this for what it is, which is a major escalation by Ukraine into Russian territory. So also remember folks, if you found this content informative and you like the war updates just like this one, remember to hit the like button and also subscribe to our channel as well, because that greatly helps us get the news out there. And also we love to see that y'all love these short war summaries, because we intend to keep putting them out every day that there's major news happening. And also be sure to join us at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight to cover the rest of the war news that comes out today, because we'll be covering that in depth, and we'll have both of us on stream, the Enforcer and also me, Enforcer Matt, to discuss that with you this afternoon. And also real quick, just a quick little note, I'm sure people are wondering what's happening in the Middle East, and quite frankly I didn't have enough room in this video to cover that, but currently it looks like Iran is still making preparations to attack Israel, and potentially Israel's thinking about preparing a preemptive strike on the Iranians. So it's still sitting in limbo, but nonetheless that's still a major story as well. I just simply didn't have enough room to cover it in this video. But with that, we'll see y'all tonight, and thank you for watching, and bye bye for now.